Hey there guys, Eli again coming at you from OSA in Coventry, here to show off what I consider quite an underrated fish, something that we always seem to have in our saltwater section here at OSA, and that you can find at a lot of the other stores as well. But that is the Engineer Goby, these three little guys that kind of look eel-like in the corner there. Their scientific name is Pholodictes leucotania. Please don't ask me to say that one again. But these guys are quite a unique fish. At this size right here, they are still juveniles and they are kind of exhibiting their juvenile coloration still. They do drastically change in color and appearance as they get quite a bit older. So let's start out with why do they get the name Engineer Goby? So from a ecological standpoint, these guys would be considered an ecosystem engineer because they alter their habitats in which they live in. So these guys are known for moving sand, basically. They build tunnels and burrows throughout the sand to kind of make themselves some structure under the sand bed to live in. These guys are also a social species, so usually these tunnels that they construct will house a good sized grouping of these fish. They do live in groups in the wild and do kind of prefer groups in the aquarium setting as well. So these guys are pretty neat in the fact that they do make these burrows and they fortify them to make these cool tunnel systems under the substrate in which they call home. Also interesting ecologically about these guys is they are mimics. So at this size right here, they are exhibiting this kind of coloration, this black with these horizontal white bars to mimic a banded coral goby. They do this because these coral gobies are quite spiny and actually mildly venomous. Which most fish decide not to eat these fish if they have ever tried once because of this venom and because of those spines. So in the wild, those coral gobies do exist in these big, large schools, big bait balls, in which they tightly school together, which these guys are trying to mimic right now to kind of look like these gobies, to tell all the other predatory fish around them, don't eat me, I'm spiny, I'm venomous. Whether this is true or not really true in their case, but kind of interesting. And if you guys remember from a few months back, our video that Taras did, his What is a Goby video, we did accidentally cut to a scene of a banded coral goby because they do look so similar in appearance to this fish because they were in a tank right next door. Kind of an interesting thing about those fish is that they mimic at a small size. As they grow a bit larger, this coloration, where they kind of still have the same coloration, their pattern will change, so they'll be like black and yellowish white with vertical bars that kind of more mimics an eel, like a moray eel, banded moray. And once these guys get some size to them, it can be kind of difficult not to assume that they are an eel themselves, but they do happen to be a true goby. As I mentioned earlier, these are quite social fish, and keeping them in a small group is one of the coolest ways to observe their behavior. I was lucky enough to get to watch over the coral farm with Alex last week for Chris the Bandsaw Bandit, and he does have a small shoal of these in one of his coral tanks, and they happen to be one of my favorite things at that farm at the moment. Despite there being a whole bunch of really cool corals and me being a coral head, while I was watching over the farm, that was my favorite tank to watch just because their behavior was so interesting to see. These guys do group pretty tightly, and they also kind of seem to establish a little bit of a pecking order to where there might be a dominant male that kind of watches over the entire group. And they also kind of take turns building the burrows. They also seem to have quite a good awareness of their surroundings. So as I was taking care of their tanks at the farm, that whole group of Engineer Gobies had their heads almost out of the water, kind of watching my every move to see what I was doing, which I just found kind of interesting. So these guys are a very interactive fish in the aquarium as well. As for whether these are cut out for every aquarium, in my opinion, they are definitely not. As I mentioned earlier, they do burrow, they do make these intricate tunnels in the sand underneath your rockwork. So these guys tend to make a mess of the sand bed. And if your rockwork was not placed originally on the bottom pane of glass on your aquarium, if these guys are to burrow around your rocks, they can cause rocks to shift, which can end up with a mess. Either toppled rocks over, and you can kind of risk scratching and or cracking your glass if you're not careful enough about how your rockwork escapes before you add one or a group of these guys. In addition, they are also considered reef safe with caution because they can be mildly predatory as they gain some size to them, generally going after small invertebrates like hermit crabs or smaller shrimp as they get some size. Full grown size for these guys is somewhere from about a foot to maybe 14 inches, so they also do need kind of a larger tank. I would say if you're going to house a single specimen, something 40 to 50 gallons, possibly larger. And if you're looking to do a group, I would say at least double that, 75, 90, even bigger if you can get away with it, because these fish do get kind of large. And although they will kind of stick to their burrows, they do make quite large burrows and can benefit from a large footprint of the tank. Another interesting thing about these fish is kind of similar to like freshwater cichlids. They do exhibit, from what I've read, a high degree of parental supervision of their eggs and larvae, which is pretty interesting. So as these guys nest in their burrows, a pair of adults that lays the eggs will watch over the larvae for quite a while as they grow to kind of make sure that they do get a fighting chance to live, which is kind of interesting because a lot of our saltwater fish do not do nearly as much for their children. So just kind of interesting about these guys. So to wrap it up, these guys are definitely a very interesting fish to engineer goby, to add to an aquarium. Very personable, interesting, unique critter, but not necessarily suited for every aquarium. As always, thank you guys for watching. Let us know if you have comments or suggestions in the comment section below, and keep on reefing.